Okay. This meeting is being recorded. Before I forget, Tom, that is a blue light on that diffuser. I forgot. I wasn't paying attention. And it is a blue light on the diffuser.
All right. Now you just need to get some psychedelic poster and put it behind it so it shines like neon.
Uh-huh. Maybe we can get, well, I guess this would have been a few years later, but maybe we could get Bob out here in one of his 5 leisure suits that he used to own. So before we jump in to kind of the beginning of the end of the book of Numbers, is there anything still kind of hanging out or anything from last week that is still in need of some more attention? And if not, that's okay. So we have actually made it the majority of the way through the book time-wise. We are going to spend just a little more time in the wilderness before we arrive at the east bank of the Jordan River, and we are on the cusp of entering into the Promised Land. If you'll recall, there are the 3 settings in which the book of Numbers takes place: the foot of Mount Sinai, where we are for about 10 days, the wilderness, where we are for about 38 years, and the frontier of the Promised Land, where we are for about 5 months. So, and again, in each geographic location, we're going to look at 3 different types of material. We're going to start tonight with narrative. Then we will turn to some teaching or legal material. We'll turn to some poetic material, which again is often the largest or the oldest type of material in any book. And then we're going to turn to kind of the New Testament reception of this book of Numbers. So we are going to start with what is likely one of the most familiar passages out of the book of Numbers to Christian readers, probably the only part of Numbers that is more familiar than what we're about to turn to here is the priestly benediction that we looked at some time ago, which is the benediction that I offer at the end of worship every week. So this is probably the next most well-known passage out of Numbers for Christian readers. And if you don't recognize it right away, once I mention why I think it's probably pretty well known, I think it will all click for folks. So Renee, would you turn on your microphone and share with us, please, Numbers chapter 21, verses 1 through 9.
I'm sorry, would you repeat that? I was trying to get myself unmuted.
Yes, Numbers chapter 21, verses 1 through 9. If you can just make sure you're turned toward the microphone so we can hear you.
Okay. When the Canaanite king of Aram, who lived in the Negev, heard that Israel was coming along the road to Atharim, he attacked the Israelites and captured some of them. Then Israel made this vow to the Lord: if you will deliver these people into our hands, we will totally destroy their cities. The Lord listened to Israel's plea and gave the Canaanites over to them. They completely destroyed them and their towns, so the place was named Hormah. They traveled from Mount Hor along the route to the Red Sea to go around Edom, but the people grew impatient on the way. They spoke against God and against Moses and said, "Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to die? In the wilderness, there is no bread, there is no water, and we detest this miserable food." Then the Lord sent venomous snakes among them. They bit the people, and many Israelites died. The people came to Moses and said, "We sinned when we spoke against the Lord and against you. Pray that the Lord will take the snakes away from us." So Moses prayed for the people. The Lord said to Moses, "Make a snake and put it up on a pole. Anyone who is bitten can look at it and live." So Moses made a bronze snake and put it on a pole. Then, when anyone was bitten by a snake and looked at the bronze snake, they lived.
So is this story ringing any bells with anybody?
Yeah, it's almost a dead ringer for when they first came out of Egypt, I think.
For sure, yeah. This pattern. What is this pattern? What are you seeing that is shockingly similar to stuff we've seen before?
Complaining. No food, no water.
Why did God bring us out of Egypt, implying being in Egypt was better?
Right.
And I'm trying to see if this is the spot where they say, there's no food. We detest this miserable food. So
Yes.
God is feeding them, but they don't like the food. So it's kind of like, no, we're going to pretend like there's not food out here. And then what happens next? People complain. What is God's response very often in the book of Numbers?
A nasty punishment.
Yeah, there's some wrath or some smiting. And what happens after that? What do the people do?
Repent.
They repent. And who do they say needs to go talk to God for them?
Moses.
Right. Moses, can you talk to God about this? And God relents. So yeah, absolutely. We have seen this pattern many, many, many times. Is this specific instance of the pattern where the part of God relenting involves this bronze serpent? Does that ring in any bells for anybody?
I don't know if this is what you're referring to, but it always makes me think, and I'm sure it's how the serpent and whatever it's called, staff and serpent, are displayed for medical insignia.
Right. I think that's part of it. I think it also traces its roots to the Greek deity Asclepius, who is renowned for healing. And his powers were given to him by Apollo, and one of Apollo's attributes is the snake. So I think there may be some biblical background to that symbol, but also some Greek background. I tell you what, let me point folks in a specific direction here. Carol, will you please turn to John and share with us John chapter 3, verses 11 through 16.
Very truly, I tell you, we speak of what we know and testify to what we have seen. Yet you do not receive our testimony. If I have told you about earthly things and you do not believe, how do you believe if I tell you about heavenly things? How far am I supposed to go, Pastor? I'm sorry.
Down through verse 16.
16, okay. No one has ascended into heaven except the one who descended from heaven, the Son of Man. And just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whoever believes in him may have eternal life. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, so that everyone who believes in him may not perish, but may have eternal life.
So when Jesus and Nicodemus are having this conversation, which contains some of the most well-known words in Scripture, Jesus points back to Moses making the serpent in the wilderness. And I think it's a really fascinating comparison, because what Moses does here is he takes a form of what is causing the people harm. He takes a form of that and uses it to heal people from that harm. And I think you are on very good theological ground if you understand it as Jesus being lifted up on the cross, dying. Whoever looks on him on the cross is then healed from the effects of death. So Jesus uses this story from Numbers, which we don't hear about very much in Scripture anywhere else. There's one other spot, and we are going to look at that. But Jesus turns to this as an understanding of what his death means. And so I think that's just a fascinating connection. So it's that introduction that we get to that famous John 3:16 right there. And Jesus turns to the book of Numbers to help people understand who he is and what he's about. So if you maybe somewhere we're thinking bronze serpent. I think, what is familiar to me about that? It's because we hear that story from Jesus several times throughout our lectionary. And I think each time we have John chapter 3 as the gospel on a Sunday, we then have Numbers 21 as the Old Testament reading. So I can assure you, you have heard this before, but my hope is that just in looking at it in study, we get a little bit different aspect to it there. Something else that I thought was interesting, the fiery serpents or the poisonous serpents that slither through the camp. In Hebrew, literally they are seraphim. So oftentimes we think about angels. Even the word angelic usually means something cute and sweet. And there's even the Christmas carol, cherubim, seraphim, come and worship him. I'm trying to remember. So, okay, thank you. At least Renee is nodding at me. Somebody remembers that. So we often think of angels as being, very wonderful beings. The seraphim, which is the plural of seraph, they are scary. You do not want to meet a seraph. They are fiery serpents. When Adam and Eve are thrown out of the garden, I believe God says, I will put the seraph at the entrance to the garden so they cannot get in. So the seraphs that go through the camp, they are part of the heavenly court. They are heavenly beings that come into the camp, and they are heavenly beings you do not want to meet. So I just find that also worth noting for people, because often we think of the cherubim and the seraphim, and they're so fantastic. No, you do not, like I said, you do not want to meet seraphim. Like I said, this is not a story that gets a ton of press in Scripture, but very important for how Jesus understands his ministry. And there is one other epilogue that we get to this story. And Tom, I'm going to ask you to share that with us. If you could turn, please, to 2 Kings chapter 18, verse 4.
He removed the high places, broke down the pillars, and cut down the sacred pole. He broke in pieces the bronze serpent that Moses had made, for until those days the people of Israel had been offering to it. It was called Nehushtan.
So this bronze serpent that Moses made in the wilderness had apparently gone with the people in all their various travels and journeys and ended up in the temple. Now, when Josiah, was it Josiah or Hezekiah? I should have looked at that before I flipped back to Numbers there. Wait a minute. Hezekiah. So when Hezekiah decided he wanted to kind of purify worship in the country, he removed the high places. Those are kind of unauthorized places of worship around the country. He broke down the pillars. He cut down the sacred pole. So those are things used in worshiping other gods. So if you see your footnote there by sacred pole, that's an Asherah pole. That is for worshiping a fertility goddess of some kind. Some of you may be familiar with Asherah by another group of people that worshipped her called her Ishtar, and that of course became the name of a movie that was the topic of a Far Side cartoon, which is how I know about the movie.
What's Hezekiah? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, was Hezekiah the king that wanted to centralize worship again instead of people off in their own, depending on where they lived?
That tendency happened several times throughout the Old Testament. I think David wanted to build a temple, and God said, no, you're not building a temple. Solomon did build the temple, so I think there was a interest in centralizing worship under Solomon, and then that kind of ebbed and flowed throughout the monarchy. I think based on what we have here, Hezekiah is trying to kind of re-centralize that. And hold on a minute. And then a couple chapters later, in 2 Kings 22, we get Josiah. And Josiah really attempts to kind of reestablish that centralized worship. And we see that because we believe it says in the renovation of the temple, they came across the book of the law, which is commonly understood to be the book of Deuteronomy, which we will get to eventually. But that idea that very often the monarchs wanted to centralize worship, I think it was both a faithful thing to do, because we see several times throughout Scripture it says you will worship at the place God will show you, that is Jerusalem. But I think it was also a political, to their political advantage, to have the centralized worship of God kind of right there in their backyard was also good. So yes, I believe Hezekiah was one of the people who felt more strongly about it than some of the other kings probably did. But you're very welcome. And in the course of trying to do that, he's taking down the high places, he's cutting down the pillars and the poles. And then we go in the temple, and in the temple, people have been making offerings to this bronze serpent. This was a problem. You don't make offerings to anything other than God. So it's kind of interesting that this item that was given to the God's people as something to heal them eventually has kind of taken on a life of its own. They give it a name, Nehushtan, and people are kind of performing acts of worship devoted to this thing that was originally given by God for healing. So I just find that to be just a fascinating epilogue to the story. We don't hear anything about this bronze snake throughout the settlement of the promised land, throughout the period of the judges, the early monarchy, and then it shows up again generations later under Hezekiah, and it's taken on this life of its own and kind of needs to be cleansed from the temple. So that is the fate of the bronze serpent. Let me stop there. Questions, comments, concerns, insights? So we are going to turn next to one of the longest narratives in the book of Numbers, and we will kind of go through it and see what sense we can make out of it. We'll break this up into a couple of readings here. We're going to turn to chapter 22, and Jane, if I could have you read chapter 22, verses 1 through 6. Nick, if you could read with us, please, 7 through 14, and then I will jump in with 15 through 21. So we'll break that into kind of 3 pieces here.
Okay, the Israelites set out and camped in the plains of Moab across from the Jordan from Jericho. Now Balak, son of Zippor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. Moab was in great dread of the people because they were so numerous. Moab was overcome with fear of the people of Israel. And Moab said to the elders of Midian, "This horde will now lick up all that is around us, as an ox licks up the grass of the field." Now Balak, the son of Zippor, was king of Moab at the time. He sent messengers to Balaam, son of Beor, and Pethor, which is on the Euphrates in the land of Ammon, to summon him, saying, a people has come out of Egypt. They have spread over the face of the earth, and they have settled next to me. Come now, curse the people for me, since they are stronger than I. Perhaps I shall be able to defeat them and drive them from this land. For I know that whomever you bless is blessed, and whomever you curse is cursed.
So the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian departed with the feast for divination in their land. So they came to Balaam and gave him Balak's message. He said to them, stay here tonight, and I will bring back word to you, just as the Lord speaks to me. So the officials of Moab stayed with Balaam. God came to Balaam and said, who are these men with you? Balaam said to God, King Balak, son of Zippor of Moab, has sent me this message. A people has come out of Egypt and spread out over the face of the earth. Now come and curse them for me. Perhaps I shall be able to fight against them and drive them out. God said to Balaam, you shall not go with them. You shall not curse the people, for they are blessed. So Balaam rose in the morning and said to the officials of Balak, go to your own land, for the Lord has refused to let me go with you. So the officials of Moab rose and went to Balak and said, Balaam refuses to come with us.
So King Balak in Moab sees all of these Israelites coming out of the wilderness, and he says, man, there are a lot of them. I'm going to call in some help. So he reaches out to Balaam, who apparently lives somewhere along the Euphrates River, and says, you practice divination. You know how to kind of manipulate supernatural powers. I want you to come in and curse these people so that we have a chance to defeat them in battle. And he sends his people, and they go to Balaam, and he says, let me see what God has to say about this. And God says, do not curse these people. They are blessed. And so Balaam says, you know what, I'm sorry, I'm not going to go with you. So is kind of the arc of the story clear for everybody so far?
The only thing that's unclear is that it says Balaam is from the Euphrates, which is Mesopotamia or Assyria, at different time periods. So how would there be any relationship with God from somebody from that neck of the woods?
Well, remember, first of all, that's the land of Abraham. So we know people were worshiping this God long before this, but I think it also, God just showed up and started talking to Balaam. So he had a direct encounter with God. So that, I think, probably has a lot to do with it. But yeah, it is an interesting thing. I think one of the things we are going to see is none of the people in this story that is contained in the book of Numbers are Israelites. And yet, the God of Israel is interacting with them and kind of shaping things that happen among them to advance God's mission. But I will say that Abraham was from this neck of the woods, and he worshipped this God. And it says right there, God said to Balaam. So God showed up and had a conversation with this person. He's supposed to be able to practice divination. So hopefully he understands that, yeah, God is talking to him. So he says, no, I'm not going. And back to the text, once again, Balak sent officials, more numerous and more distinguished than these. They came to Balaam and said to him, thus says Balak, son of Zippor, do not let anything hinder you from coming to me, for I will surely do you great honor, and whatever you say to me I will do. Come, curse this people for me. But Balaam replied to the servants of Balak, although Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not go beyond the command of the Lord my God to do less or more. You remain here as the others did, so that I may learn what more the Lord may say to me. That night God came to Balaam and said to him, If the men have come to summon you, get up and go with them. But do only what I tell you to do. So Balaam got up in the morning, saddled his donkey, and went with the officials of Moab. So they come again. They say, yeah, we're going to pay you even better. What's going to entice you to come? And God shows up and says to Balaam, okay, go with them, but you need to do exactly what I tell you to do. And then we get to the next part of the story, which is even more fascinating. Renee, would you share with us, please, verses 22 through 30?
But God was very angry when he went, and the angel of the Lord stood in the road to oppose him. Balaam was riding on his donkey, and his 2 servants were with him. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road with a drawn sword in his hand, it turned off the road into a field. Balaam beat it to get it back on the road. Then the angel of the Lord stood in a narrow path through the vineyards with walls on both sides. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, it pressed close to the wall, crushing Balaam's foot against it. So he beat the donkey again. Then the angel of the Lord moved on ahead and stood in the narrow place where there was no room to turn, either to the right or to the left. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, it lay down under Balaam, and he was angry and beat it with his staff. Then the Lord opened the donkey's mouth, and it said to Balaam, What have I done to you to make you beat me these 3 times? Balaam answered the donkey, You have made a fool of me. If only I had a sword in my hand, I would kill you right now. The donkey said to Balaam, Am I not your own donkey, which you have always ridden to this day? Have I been in the habit of doing this to you? No, he said.
So, yeah, this is kind of a fascinating story here. But I think the long and short of it is this person who is supposed to be skilled at divination. He's supposed to be skilled at kind of detecting and interpreting and communicating with the divine, hence divination, is going along the road, and he does not sense that the angel is there, but his donkey does. The donkey understands that a messenger from God is in front of them on the road, but the guy who's supposed to practice divination does not. What might that say about his divination skills?
Well, I find it humorous that there's no conversation like, why is this donkey I've always had suddenly talking to me? He doesn't even seem to acknowledge that the donkey is speaking words.
Yes, yeah, that's and it just reminds me of the story of Adam and Eve in the garden. Why was the first thing Eve said not a talking snake? You know, but yeah, it's bizarre. But remember, I don't think the lesson in the story is not really for them as much as it is for us who read it. Right. So what might this say about the practice of divination?
But it's not pure, it's not true, and it's not from God. If it was from God, then it would be pure and true 100% every time.
Yep. Yeah. Throughout the Old Testament, God is not okay with divination and stuff like that. So we kind of see that. And now the man is, so remember, the king of the Moabites, and the Moabites are historic enemies of the Israelites. And who's writing this account? What type of people are writing the story?
Israelites.
Yeah, so this is Israelites writing the story, and they are writing about people who are their historic enemies. And you know, the diviner that the king of the Moabites has called in to curse them is on the road arguing with his donkey. So I think there's, you know, maybe an element of look at these people who are our enemies. Look at the kind of crazy stuff they do. So he's there arguing with the donkey, and let's turn to what happens next. Carol, would you share with us, please, verses chapter 22, verses 31 through 40?
Then the Lord opened the eyes of Balaam, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road with his sword drawn in his hand. And he bowed down, falling on his face. The angel of the Lord said to him, "Why have you struck your donkey these 3 times? I have come out as an adversary because your way is perverse before me. The donkey saw me and turned away from me these 3 times. If it had not turned away from me, surely just now I would have killed you and let it live." Then Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, "I have sinned, for I did not know that you were standing in the road to oppose me. Now, therefore, if it is displeasing to you, I will return home." The angel of the Lord said to Balaam, "Go with these men, but speak only what I tell you to speak." So Balaam went to the officials of Balak. When Balak heard that Balaam had come, he went out to meet him at Ir Moab on the boundary formed by the Arnon at the farthest point of the boundary. Balak said to Balaam, "Did I not send to summon you? Why did you not come to me? Am I not able to honor you?" Balaam said to Balak, "I have come to you now, but I do not have the power to say just anything. The word God puts in my mouth, that is what I must say." Then Balaam went with Balak, and they came to the Kerith-Huthoreth. Balak sacrificed oxen and sheep and sent them to Balaam and to the officials who were with him.
So Balaam has just had this encounter with the angel. He is, I mean, the angel was right in his face. The angel says, you were this close to me cutting you into pieces. Do you understand that you are supposed to give the message that God gives you? And Balaam does understand that. He continues on the journey. He gets to Balak, and he warns Balak. He says, "I can't say just whatever pops into my mouth." Or maybe he's trying to get Balak to read between the lines. "I can't necessarily just say what you brought me here and paid me to say. I have to say the message God gives me." So we are going to come back to the specifics of the message that God gives Balaam, but Balaam gives a series of 3 oracles or 3 messages from God, and there's a summary of that. And like I said, we'll look at these because it's more poetic content, but let us turn to chapter 24, verses 10 through 14. Tom, would you share that summary of what these oracles oracles say?
Then Balak's anger was kindled against Balaam, and he struck his hands together. Balak said to Balaam, I summoned you to curse my enemies, but instead you have blessed them these 3 times. Now be off with you, go home. I said, I will reward you richly, but the Lord has denied you any reward. And Balaam said to Balak, did I not tell your messengers whom you sent to me, if Balak should give me his house full of silver and gold, I would not be able to go beyond the word of the Lord to do either good or bad of my own will. What the Lord says, that is what I will say. So now I am going to my people. Let me advise you what this people will do to your people in days to come.
So what can we infer was the content of these 3 revelations that Balaam shared with Balak?
Probably leave the Israelites alone, or something bad's going to happen.
Yeah, in fact, he's spoken words of blessing on the Israelites. And I summoned you here to curse my enemies, but instead you've blessed them. And Balaam says, I told your people I was going to have to say whatever I divined was that I was supposed to say. And after his encounter with the angel, he is definitely saying what God wants him to say. And so I just think it's a fascinating account of the way God works through people outside of the people of Israel to further his mission, because this makes the people of Moab, who are wanting to block Israel's way, it kind of neutralizes them. It kind of takes them out of the picture, because the king is afraid they will not be able to win without divine help. And now he has been assured there will be no divine help. And so we see in other contexts, even within the Old Testament, God uses Assyria as God's, to channel God's wrath against the kingdom of Israel. God uses Babylon to punish the kingdom of Judah, but God also uses the Persians. He uses Cyrus to free Judah from captivity in Babylon. So God often, because remember, the promise to Abraham is, through your people, all the world will know me and be blessed. So God is at work in other places outside of Israel, but the revelation of who this God is and what this God is about has not been made in the same way at this part of the Heilsgeschichte, or the history of salvation. Woke up this morning, I did not think I was going to have the chance to use that word, but there it is. And no, do not ask me to spell it. If you want to know how it's spelled, talk to your phone and let Google or Siri figure it out. Questions, comments, concerns, insights? Well, let us go ahead and for this evening, let's plan on wrapping up this narrative section. So we got a couple more sections to look at, and I think we'll be in pretty good shape by the time we get that done. Jane, would you share with us, please, chapter 25, verses 1 through 9?
While Israel was staying at Shittim, the people began to have sexual relationships with the women of Moab. These invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. Thus Israel yoked itself to Baal of Peor, and the Lord's anger was kindled against Israel. The Lord said to Moses, take all the chiefs of your people and impale them in the sun before the Lord, in order that the fierce anger of the Lord may turn away from Israel. And Moses said to the judges of Israel, each of you shall kill any of your people who have yoked themselves with the Baal of Peor. Just then one of the Israelites came and brought a Midianite woman into his family. And in the sight of Moses and in the sight of the whole congregation of the Israelites, while they were weeping at the entrance of the tent of meetings, when Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron the priest, saw it, he got up and left the congregation. Taking a spear in his hand, he went after the Israelite man into the tent and pierced the two of them, the Israelite and the woman, through the belly. So the plague was stopped among the people of Israel. Nevertheless, those that died by the plague were 24,000.
Yeah, when God decides it's time for a plague, God does not mess around. So what is the problem here?
Relationship with the Moabites.
Right. And it's that is problematic in some senses, but it's also that through that relationship, the Moabites get them to start worshiping other gods. And if there is one thing we can say that is fairly consistent across the entire witness of the Hebrew Bible, worshiping other gods is never okay. And so the Israelites, in addition now to kind of the complaining in the desert and second guessing God's goodness of what God has done for them, now they just go ahead and turn to another god. And this is a problem. Interestingly enough, Moses is not the one who takes action that kind of changes what God wants to do. It is actually one of Aaron's descendants who jumps into action here and does something that gets God to say, okay, enough. So we have worshiping another god. So again, you can understand why God kind of wants to have a fresh start when God brings these people into the promised land. And hence why it's 40 years until everyone except Caleb and Joshua have died off. So that whole generation that came out of Egypt are gone. God's having a fresh start because this is the sort of thing that he gets from the people he brought out of Egypt.
Didn't Moses marry a Midianite woman?
I believe so. And for some reason, I'm remembering the woman's name was Zipporah.
Oh, yes.
But yeah, I believe she was a Midianite. Her father, Jethro, is actually venerated in Islam. So I showed you pictures last week of my trek up to Mount Hor, up to Jebel Haroun, Aaron's mountain. One of the other places we visited over there, there's a lot of tombs in Jordan, and one of them was the tomb of the prophet Shuaib, which is, he's a person out of the Quran, but he's usually identified with Jethro. And the reason he is venerated as a prophet is because he affirms that God has called Moses to go and deliver these people. So he's a prophet because he delivers the message from God that, yes, you really are supposed to go do that. And, we went to this place, the tomb of the prophet Shuaib, and there was just something about that place. It just had this really profound sense of peacefulness that was really cool. It was a beautiful place, just kind of out in the middle of nowhere. But it was a really neat place to see. So yes, Moses marries a Midianite woman, and my best guess, and I want to be clear that this is my best guess, guess as to why Moses can marry a Midianite woman, and now it's a problem when someone else does it, is likely that when Moses married this Midianite woman, God had not revealed most of the law to him. We had not gotten the second half of Exodus and most of the book of Leviticus that specified, which people were okay to marry and which people were not. So my guess is, if you were looking for a reason why this guy could not marry a Midianite, even though Moses had, is because they're at a point in their history now where these people should know better. That's my guess.
Well,
I could be completely wrong. I wasn't there, but that's my guess.
Well, I wonder if it's because Moses didn't turn around and follow her gods. He didn't worship her gods. These guys did. And that probably would irk God more than the marriage itself, but that they turned around and worshiped other gods.
That's right, because
Right?
it's always about idolatry. Yes, that'll preach. I will buy that.
I did a quick look because there was a reference to Exodus chapter 2, 15 through 22, and I read it quickly now, and it was Moses. It was actually fleeing. It was a time when he fled from Pharaoh, and that's when he was actually given the man that he stayed with his daughter in marriage. So it was a little more honorable, I guess, than what was going on in what we just read.
Okay. So yes, the context was different.
Quite a bit.
Very good. Any other thoughts on this incident? Let's press a little bit farther now into Numbers. Nick, would you share with us, please, chapter 27, verses 12 through 23?
The Lord said to Moses, "Go up this mountain of the Abiram range and see the land I have given to the Israelites. When you have seen it, you also shall be gathered to your people as your brother Aaron was, because you rebelled against my word in the wilderness of Zin when the congregation quarreled with me. You did not show my holiness before their eyes at the waters. These are the waters of Meribah Kadesh in the wilderness of Zin." Moses spoke to the Lord, saying, "Let the Lord, Lord of the spirits of all flesh, appoint someone over the congregation who shall go out before them and come in before them, and who shall lead them out and bring them in, so that the congregation of the Lord may not be like sheep without shepherd." So the Lord said to Moses, "Take Joshua, son of Nun, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay your hand upon him. Have him stand before Eleazar, the priest, and all the congregation, and commission him in their sight. You shall give him some of your authority, so that all the congregation of Israelites may obey. But he shall stand before Eleazar the priest, who shall inquire for him by the decision of the Urim before the Lord. At his word they shall go out, and at his word they shall come in. But he and the Israelites with him, the whole congregation." So Moses did as the Lord commanded him. He took Joshua and had him stand before Eleazar the priest and the whole congregation, and he laid his hand on him and commissioned him as the Lord had directed through Moses.
So this is, of course, pretty important for setting the stage for the next part of the story, this is, of course, the same Joshua who the book of the Bible is named after. God once again reminds Moses, you will not be entering the promised land. And Moses says, these people need someone to lead for them. God, I pray that you will give them someone to lead them. We do not want them to be like sheep without a shepherd. And so God says, yes, take Joshua and lay your hands on him. So he lays hands on him, and the Lord said to Moses, take Joshua, son of Nun, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay your hand on him. And certainly I would assume our Jewish brothers and sisters would interpret that differently, but I read that as the Holy Spirit being at work. And I think, at least from a Christian perspective, I think you're on safe ground to understand that the Holy Spirit, throughout much of the history of God and God's people, was kind of reserved for particular people at particular moments, because they talk about the Spirit of the Lord being on certain people and other people, but not the whole people. Then at Pentecost, the big deal is that Spirit that was reserved for prophets and kings and priests, that is poured out on all God's people. Joel, the prophet, says, your young men will dream dreams and your old men will prophesy. On men and women, slave and free, the Spirit will be poured out. And so here, I think what I read is that the Holy Spirit is here, and that Holy Spirit is present in Joshua because God is empowering him. God is possessing him, in a sense, to say, you are going to lead my people after Moses. So we are preparing, because we know Moses is not going to cross into the promised land, and now the people are right at the cusp of the promised land. So we got to have somebody to take his place, because he's not going to make it.
So how would the Jews look at that differently with respect to Joshua in terms of, not being the Holy Spirit, since there is no such thing? But so how would they look at that?
My guess is they would maybe look at it simply in terms of, it's like a power or a presence from God. It's a spirit, it's a breath, something that fills him and gives him something the other people don't have. But it is not understood as this is actually a part of God that is kind of dwelling in him. So I think that would probably be the biggest difference, is there's no idea of God's Spirit as a distinct yet fully integral part of God, if that makes sense. So understanding it as the Holy Spirit, capital H, capital S, part of the Trinity, that would not happen. But the idea that there is some sort of energy that is filling him, that I think people might be open to.
Verse 21, Eleazar seeks a decision or approval by God by Urim and Thummim. I assume the stones, like dice, you throw the dice. Heads means God says okay. Tails means God is not okay. Something like that. Yes.
I think we came across those in Leviticus. I cannot certainly not point you to where particularly, but they are device for casting lots. The idea being that God will reveal whatever it is God wants to reveal through this. So one of the other key things that we come across as we are here on this plain on the eastern side of the Jordan River is chapter 33. And that is, it's a summary. Just kind of says, this is where they came from. This is where they went. These are some of the key things that happened along the way. And it just goes through the high points of the journey. And it gives the, kind of gives some geographical points. These are the stages by which the Israelites set up from the land of Egypt in military formation under the leadership of Moses and Aaron. And it just recaps the trip and gives some highlights. And then we get to chapter 33, the end of chapter 33, verses 50 through 56. And here's where we get some very specific things the people are supposed to pay attention to as they cross over into the promised land. I'll go ahead and share that with us. So this is chapter 33, verses 50 through 56. In the plains of Moab, by the Jordan at Jericho, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you cross over the Jordan into the land of Canaan, you shall drive out all the inhabitants of the land before you. Destroy all their figured stones, destroy all their cast images, and demolish all their high places. You shall take possession of the land and settle in it, for I have given you the land to possess. You shall apportion the land by lot according to your clans. To a large one you shall give a large inheritance, and to a small one you shall give a small inheritance. The inheritance shall belong to the person on whom the lot falls. According to your ancestral tribes you shall inherit. But if you do not drive out the inhabitants of the land before you, then those whom you let remain shall be as barbs in your eyes and thorns in your sides. They shall trouble you in the land where you are settling, and I will do to you as I thought to do to them."
Drive out, he means kill them, right? Drive out doesn't mean
Yeah, I mean,
let them to another land, just kill them.
I think it could also be drive them out of the land, but I think the point is they are supposed to clear the land completely of the people who were there. And God is very specific: destroy their stones, destroy the cast images, demolish the high places. You can't keep these people around because they worship other gods, and you're going to start worshiping other gods. So there's, I believe, some significant foreshadowing, because I think most of us understand that the story of God's people in the Holy Land, once they get there, it is not just all wine and roses. I mean, there continues to be a struggle. And when we get into the book of Deuteronomy, I think what we are going to start to see is the people writing Deuteronomy are trying to explain why that struggle goes on for so long among God's people. But I think here, these directions they get directly from God through Moses. You need to clear out the land completely. Get rid of all the people who are there. Break down everything that could possibly be used to worship another god, and you'll be in good shape. But if you fail to do that, those whom you let remain shall be as barbs in your eyes and thorns in your sides. They shall trouble you in the land where you are settling, and I will do to you as I thought to do to them. So I think we are opening the door to some significant struggle to come here. Let me stop there. Questions, comments, concerns, things where you're just going, I'm not sure that makes sense, or things where you're going, you know, Eric, you said this and I don't buy it. I'm okay with that in Bible study. Just don't do that in worship.
it definitely has some ramifications even in today's world with the Jewish state. If you with the Jewish and Palestinian issue, you can see how, for lack of a better word, how difficult that whole situation is, really, from a Jewish state point of view. It just was a thought that occurred to me that you can see why there's certainly a segment in Israel that thinks nothing of going on some of those Palestinian lands, which would probably be part of this land of Moab, and settling down.
Yeah, it's a tremendously complicated situation. And yeah, there are people who come right out and say, well, God gave us this land, and the people who are already living on the land could come back and say, yes, but God took the land away because you were worshiping other gods. So it's there is very little simple about the whole situation, but it is kind of an interesting parallel, because in Exodus, or in the story of the Exodus, you have people who are coming out of a terrible situation, and they are showing up in this land where they want to live in peace, but there's already people living there. And that does not sit well for anybody. You have people who are leaving Europe after World War II. They are coming out of a terrible situation, and they want to go to this land where they can live in peace. And there are already people living there. And it just does not sit well with any of the people. So there are definitely some interesting parallels. And as far as the story told in Scripture goes, yeah, I think these 6 verses here, we are going to see that playing out over several hundred years, and book after book after book of the Hebrew Bible. So I think it's just kind of foreshadowing. It's just kind of opening the door and giving us a glimpse of, this is the sort of thing we're going to be dealing with for a while. But yeah, it's complicated.
I mean, one could argue that God could have said, give the people there an ultimatum: either join you or be driven out or killed. But there had to be something about keeping the bloodlines pure, or something, almost, right, in terms of not letting any of those people stay in the land, because obviously that could have been another way of handling it, right? Give an ultimatum, and if you wanted to stay and be incorporated into the community as Jews, you could have, but that was obviously not given as an option.
Yeah, and I think what you were saying, Tom, about, they kind of want to keep the bloodlines consistent. I think the notion of what you're getting at is on target. I don't know if they would have said it quite the same way, but I think it kind of gives us a reference point back to what we looked at in chapter 25. Incorporating other people into the people of Israel is difficult, because those people don't come out of a vacuum. They bring their culture with them, and there are many parts of that culture that probably are in conflict with the way the people of Israel agreed to live to honor God. Now, obviously, the Midianite women bringing in their other gods, that right there, that's the first commandment. We that is non-negotiable. But there's probably other things. There's maybe dietary things or issues of what's clean and unclean, that sort of thing. So it's difficult to incorporate other people into the people of Israel and maintain the type of lifestyle that the people have agreed by covenant to live in. So I don't know if it's necessarily a matter of keeping a bloodline pure. I don't know that that aspect was really something people of that culture were real big on, but I think it was maybe more about keeping the practices and the culture faithful, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, clearing the people out, I'm sure had something to do with, we don't want these people hanging around and becoming part of our families, and they bring their crazy gods with them.
Reminds me of the history of the American Indians.
Say more.
Well, American Indians lived here, and this was their land. And it wasn't that they worshiped the wrong God, they were driven out. They were driven out because the white men wanted to take over.
Right. It wasn't even as much ideological or religious as it was, there's some good land here, and we want it, so we'll just come and take it.
But on the other hand, the natives do not believe that they own the land. They are only to be able to use the land. They do not own it. That still belongs to God.
And if you were to, I think in Israel, there would be a similar understanding that the people are not given the land as their private possession.
Correct. This
is a gift from God, that God is blessing you with allowing you to live here. So
correct.
you get that layer of difficulty in there too. Different cultures have different beliefs about what constitutes ownership. Nobody really owns the land, but God has told us we can be on this land, and other people, no, we own it. We either bought it or we took it, however it happened. So you get another layer of complication there.
Yes, well, even today, on many of the reservations, maybe not all, I can't speak about all of them. I know of some. One that I lived on for 11 years, the people there could not own the land. The tribe must own the land, and they lease it for, say, $50 for 100 years. People can build their home on it. They do not own the land the home sits on.
And is that a result of like a federal regulation, or is that
because
the nation rules the land and that is how they want to run it?
Well, basically, yes, because then it is a sovereign nation,
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, we don't have to go far to kind of see where these issues pop up. Any other thoughts or anything else that folks want to throw out there for discussion?
In this case, he's saying drive out the people, not kill everyone, right? God is saying drive out the people, or is that meaning?
My guess, without my knowledge of Hebrew is extremely minimal. I would have to look at that in some detail. My guess is they translated that because they're trying to get, it's probably a notion of they just want to displace them off the land. Now, when we get into the book of Joshua, there it does get a little more explicit. You know, every single thing needs to go. Every person, every sheep, every cow, everything must go.
Needs to be slaughtered, right?
Yes.
But here they aren't being. They're being pushed away, but not slaughtered.
Right. That's my read on it. Yes. So we will gather again next Wednesday, and we will turn to that legal or teaching material. We will spend some time with the poetic content out of this section of Numbers, and then we're going to look at some of the places where the New Testament has leaned on the book of Numbers, and just look for some, collection or connections there. And then we will take a break for a couple weeks. After that, we'll come back in January, and we will be dealing with Satan. So, pardon? So why don't we close our time this evening praying the Lord's Prayer together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Well, thank you everyone for being here, and blessings on everyone's evening. We will see everybody soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
You are very welcome. Take care.